Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina, and I am an integration specialist here at RedTeam. Today, we will be providing a basic overview of what the RedTeam Flex integration to Sage 100 looks like and how it works. RedTeam is able to integrate with Sage 100, and one of the first aspects to understand about the integration is that Sage 100 is not designed to directly integrate. So with that in mind, we utilize a third-party service, HH2, and their services to facilitate that integration connection. The important thing to remember about that is that when it's communicating through this third party of RedTeam, it's moving transactions from RedTeam as well as Sage back and forth. And once a transaction happens, it's fundamentally one way, with RedTeam sending those transactions through to Sage, but RedTeam has no way of knowing what has happened to that transaction after the fact. So if there is an edit or a deletion in one system or the other, RedTeam's not going to know, and there may be some cleanup made and required to clean up it. But once you have this HH2 synced software on your Sage server, your RedTeam has then been connected, and the preliminary configuration components can start. Now you will see that we already have our Sage, our HH2 connection connected with the operation, and the blue connect is not here. So, as mentioned, our configuration team is going to help you with a lot of this initial component setup, getting everything into RedTeam, making sure it's properly set up. And a big thing is going to be the cost codes and vendor codes. We're going to match them up one-to-one with the same code, as that is what's required by Sage in order for it to work correctly. And because of the nature of that, Sage is going to have to be the system of record for cost codes. So if you have any new cost codes that you're making down the road, once our configuration team initially sets up the cost codes, or the vendor codes for that matter, you would come into this import tool and you would click on cost codes. Once you open this up, you can choose that new cost code as well as the division that you want it associated with. And then you would click import, and that will generate that cost code inside of RedTeam. And then that way, the same ID is inside Sage, and it will be linked up. Anything on the RedTeam then that uses that code will push to the right side, and Sage, and vice versa. So now vendors are similar, but we have a little more flexibility. They are brought in with this import tool, like I said, with the configuration team. But in that vendor, it has a particular ID and name, and we can bring it into RedTeam through this import tool. But again, if there's a brand new vendor, you can come into vendors and you can choose that vendor and link it into RedTeam by finding it here. Now, if it doesn't exist in RedTeam, all you have to do is click here and then import, and it will be there. But should it be in both places, you can link them up by choosing and finding it here. Now, sometimes, and that happens when sometimes both RedTeam has been, that vendor has been entered into RedTeam as well as Sage. But you can link them here and everything will be okay then once they're linked up. Now, a lot of our customers will choose RedTeam as the system of record for vendors, so that when you have a lot of additional vendors bidding on projects and they're not awarded that project, those will not flow into Sage 100, and it's a cleaner, a vendor payable list inside Sage, so that the only ones moving forward are those that have a contract or an invoice or something like that to push on in. but that makes it much cleaner for you. So then once that Sage connection has happened, then you are through with those areas. There's some other areas here in the configuration area that I'll point out. And one of them is the tax venues, which typically, again, our configuration team will assist. But, and we find that most of our customers will want the tax venues to stay inside Sage, and they don't utilize RedTeam for that. As far as the control accounts, again, we will set up, the RedTeam will set up your general ledger control accounts, and all of that will be taken care of. Now, one thing to point out is this preference is definitely a tool for you that you can choose to use or not, but it's a minimum accounting date that you can use to prevent posting vendor invoices into an accounting period that is already closed within Sage. So this, again, is a tool that you can utilize. Now, job costs we'll touch a little more on when we get into RedTeam, but this is your job costs will basically move into RedTeam via a suite. A few other areas in this control configuration area is the login to HH2. Now, typically, you only have to go in here if you see something that did not move into Sage, and you need to go in here to see the error message. Most of the time, one of our techs will be assisting you through this. Additionally, we have the summary here that you can see how many projects have moved over, vendor invoices, commitments, customers, so forth. Additionally, we have this transaction log that when you click on the transaction log, it will provide you your most recent transactions, and it will show what date they were imported, so forth, and if they were successful or not. You have some options of filtering through here. You can filter on status, sort via the date, but we also have this transaction area that you can filter and find transactions within RedTeam. So you technically don't have to come into the configuration tab here inside HH2. So we're going to go ahead and move on over to the RedTeam. And one of the things that we have to remember is that transactions are not instantaneous with this integration, as it happens with the processing of projects as you go along. So basically, you choose which projects you are linking up and initiate that process. RedTeam on this page here will show you which projects have been linked by the Sage 100. And the black chain here indicates that it has synced over to Sage 100. Now, the yellow means that it hasn't synced over yet. And that's what we call a broken chain right now. So we're going to go into this theme park that has not moved over to Sage just yet. And you will notice that there is a 7-digit automatically generated project ID that's just a placeholder for purposes of Sage linked account. The placeholder ID within the scope of a project when a project is opened in any status other than closed. You can go into the scope tab, and then you can go into the edit, and you will see a box where you can enter the Sage ID number. So if this project already exists within Sage, you can start entering it here. And you will see that a button pops up that it says send to Sage, and it's going to move it through HH2 over to Sage 100. Now, at that point, you have linked that project to Sage. And once you have linked your project to Sage, you can then move over to the workflow of moving commitments, subcontracts, and purchase orders. And once those are executed, it triggers those commitments to send to the project to Sage and push those associated vendor costs and why it's so important that upfront those configuration setups are so, correct. If certain components are missing, the transaction's not going to get linked up, and you'll have trouble moving those transactions into Sage, and they'll error out. But if everything is set up properly, it's going to basically get linked in between RedTeam and Sage, moving through that Sage 100. Now, if we want to take a look real quick at, I want to move into a project that's already synced over to Sage 100, and we're going to go through the budget area here. And actually, I want to show you invoices first. So we're going to go over to invoices. And within the invoices, we're going to move over, and we'll be able to see that these invoices have moved into Sage 100 by being accepted, approved, and executed. You can click on the metadata log here, and you will be able to see when it was committed, when it was executed, by whom, the date, and all that information. Additionally, down the road, you will be paying those invoices within the Sage. And that brings up that these things are brought in via a sweep, the payments, and you will see that the draft, it comes in as a draft. It will tell the date, the amount that you paid it, and that is brought in as a sweep. Additionally, you can also then move back over into the budget tab, and the other item that is brought in based on your import of cost codes and different things, we with the similar as payments, we bring in via the sweep the payments as well as the job costs. And that's where we circle back around from what was initially inside the configuration area. Those job costs will come over as a sweep, and they will be brought in as actual costs. Now, those will be anything that are standalone, such as a dumpster. They can be your employee expenses. They can be your payroll, anything that's directly entered into Sage. So at that point, you can click on these blue hyperlinks, and you will be able to see these are adjusting entries that were for payroll. Now, it's not going to give you a lot of data other than the amount, what it was. But then if you have, say, you want to look at this materials here, you will see that it came in via a vendor invoice, and that was more than likely put in through the RedTeam, and it has moved into your area, or you could have possibly brought it in via the Sage, depending on where you entered that. Now, I want to show you the transactions area that I had mentioned that you can utilize within RedTeam instead of going to your configuration area. So if you click on the transactions tab here on the left side, and you go to that filter, as mentioned, there are a few more options here that you can filter by. You still have that date range, and you still have some other areas, but the biggest one that we see being utilized is the Sage 100, where you can see what has been unsent or unlinked so that you know those transactions need some work. You have the ability to choose by a customer. You can choose by transaction status, project name and scope, and so forth, as well as then you can go into your your other areas and filter that, and just clicking filter and finding some transactions, which I didn't change a date, so that's not going to work for us, is it? We're going to change a date to maybe a couple of months back. And that's going to provide us that detail. Now, as you can see, we can see that it's connected to the Sage 100. You can see the ones that came in that are unlinked, but those are okay because they are job cost employee related versus the vendor invoice. Additionally, if you wanted to check just adjusting entries, you can filter for that as well as some other things. Now, that pretty much concludes our webinar today. There is this tool that's very handy here that if you want have something that you have a quick question, or it's a great learning tool area as well. But you just click on the red bubble and you will be attached to a customer service from RedTeam who will assist you with a question. Maybe you just forget where to go to do something. But there's a lot of tools within this red bubble. So we hope that you enjoyed and this was beneficial, the webinar. We hope that you have a great day. Thank you.